it's important to keep in mind that Russia actually is barely doing anything on the ground despite enormous losses. It's been over a year and a half. They've been trying to get this town of Pokrovsk, which is in the far eastern part of Ukraine, and they still haven't been able to take it. And even after they do, then what? There's another line of Ukrainian defenders.
Mm.
So for Russia, their only real hope is that we quit.
It is time for our new regular feature. We're calling it Battlefield. And over these coming weeks, I'm going to be talking to senior military commanders about, well, their take on some of the big questions, tactical, strategic questions concerning the war in Ukraine, the defense of Europe. And we'll be getting an expert take on you, which is at any given time helps to illuminate the news, the stories which are so prominent in our news agenda. Now, first of our guests in this series, I can welcome General Ben Hodges, who's former commanding general of the United States Army in Europe. Hello to you, General.
Hey, John. Good afternoon.
It's really good to have you here, as always, General. Can I just ask you, first of all, obviously political decisions are central to big military decisions in a theatre of war like Ukraine. And now we're seeing, and you'll have seen President Trump appearing to take a tougher line on Putin and Russia. He's cut that ultimatum, hasn't he, from 50 days down to some 10 days or so for Putin to come to the negotiating table. He says will face some sort of penal action in the form of sanctions. First of all, knowing Donald Trump, knowing the way that he's addressed these things in the past, do you believe that he means what he says?
Well, I have to say, while I hope he is sincere, I am skeptical that he's going to follow through based on what's happened over the last several months. He is, after several times where he's issued some sort of an ultimatum or a threat to the Russians, he's always backed down at the last minute. And I think the Russians are demonstrating that they don't have any respect for this by actually increasing the number of attacks they're launching against innocent Ukrainian civilians. So I'm happy to hear what he's saying now. It's better than what it was, but I remain skeptical that he's actually going to follow through.
I mean, there is a cost, isn't there, to making threats and then not following them through. It does mean that your adversary, your enemy, doesn't take you seriously, and that has an impact on the battlefield.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think this whole war in Ukraine is a result of that kind of a failure dating all the way back to our failure to respond when Russia invaded Georgia, and then when the Russians jumped over President Obama's red line in Syria. They saw that we were basically disarming since the end of the Cold War, while they were going in the opposite direction. So you're right. When we don't back up words with actions, then I think they will feel pretty confident that we won't actually do anything.
Yeah, no, I'm really interested and keen to get a soldier's perspective, a former commander's perspective on the conduct of the war in Ukraine now, because we've seen the aerial warfare intensifying. Now, we know that Russia outguns Ukraine in the air when it comes to its capacity to fly drones and send missiles. In recent days, Russia's bombed a prison. They regularly bomb civilian homes and buildings, clearly to terrorize the civilian population. First of all, as a soldier, a former commander, what are your thoughts on that kind of warfare?
Well, obviously, Russia is demonstrating that they don't have the ability to penetrate or overrun Ukrainian defenses in any sort of a decisive way. So what they're doing is the only thing they can do, which is to attack every night Ukrainian cities and towns. They're not even pretending to go after industrial targets or power generation. They're going exactly after the kind of targets you just described, hospitals and even a prison. So this is in part, I think, their campaign to wear down the Ukrainians, but also to create this sort of sense of inevitability that there's no way that they'll ever stop. There's no way that Ukraine can win, which is why it's important to keep in mind that Russia actually is barely doing anything on the ground despite enormous losses. It's been over a year and a half. They've been trying to get this town of Pokrovsk, which is in the far eastern part of Ukraine, and they still haven't been able to take it. And even after they do, then what? There's another line of Ukrainian defenders. So for Russia, their only real hope is that we quit, that we stop providing Ukraine what it needs to stay in the fight, that we don't use the economic tools that we have, and that they wait us out.
Okay, now, General, I'm also keen to get your thoughts as a veteran and experienced commander at the highest level of the way the war is being conducted in another way. Ukraine, to motivate its forces, they are now awarding points to soldiers and to units that kill soldiers, valuable targets. It seems to be a development of the computer video game, which is loved, we know, by so many boys and young men in particular. Although from outside, some may say this is sanitizing, trivializing the business of killing. Or do you think, is that just too squeamish?
I think this is somebody is perhaps in some places as uncomfortable. But, I mean, as long as there have been wars, soldiers have been awarded ribbons, medals, various other devices for particular achievement or courage in combat. I mean, going centuries ago. And then, of course, in the air forces, they would, if they ever shot down an enemy airplane, they'd be able to put the emblem on the
Yes.
side of their cockpit. I mean, this was a mark of pride. And so I would not make anything out of what the article that talked about points or that sort of thing. Of course, you want to be as efficient as possible. You don't want to waste ammunition on targets that are not as important or don't have the biggest payoff as others. At the end of the day, warfare is it's not a math problem. It's not a game. It is a very, very human endeavor, and you're trying to encourage women and men in the most dire situation to be able to fight, not only to stay alive, but to accomplish their tasks.
All right, General Ben Hodges, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Mr. President, yesterday you mentioned that you would change the Russia deadline to 10 to 12 days. Has that started yet, or when can we, see the official statement that is the new deadline?
I'll tell you what, I'll give it to you now. Do you want a big scoop?
Yes, please.
Everybody else, close your ears, okay? You ready?
I'm ready.
10 days from today. And then, we're going to put on tariffs and stuff, and I don't know if it's going to affect Russia, because he wants to obviously probably keep the war going. But we're going to put on tariffs and the various things that you put on. It may or may not affect them, but it could.
Are you working?